In this lesson, we're going to talk about infrastructure as a service. Now, infrastructure as a service, also known as IaaS, is a cloud computing service model that provides users with virtualized computing resources over the internet. This includes resources such as servers, storage, and networking, which can all be easily accessed and used when needed. Now, to better understand infrastructure as a service, let me provide you with an analogy. Let's say you want to have a place to store all of your things, so you go out and rent a storage unit. Just as a storage unit is used to provide you physical space that somebody can use to store their possessions, infrastructure as a service provides virtual space for storing and managing data and applications. The renter has full control over the storage unit and can use it for whatever purpose they see fit within the guidelines that the storage unit provides. Just like the user of infrastructure as a service has full control over the virtualized resources, and they can use them for any number of projects or purposes they desire within the terms of use. In a business context, infrastructure as a service can be used in lots of different ways. For example, a company could use infrastructure as a service to host their website or to store and process large amounts of data. They could also use it to run applications or services that are critical to their business operations. In all cases, though, the company would be able to access the virtualized resources they need without having to worry about the underlying infrastructure or maintenance of that hardware. The use of infrastructure as a service can provide us with a lot of advantages to our businesses. One of the main advantages of using infrastructure as a service for an organization is the cost savings. Yes, the cost savings are huge when you're using infrastructure as a service because you're now moving everything into an operational expense instead of using things as a capital expense. Instead of having to purchase and maintain these expensive servers and all the other infrastructure, your organization will simply pay on a pay-as-you-go basis. And this can be especially beneficial for startups, small and medium-sized businesses, as well as for organizations that experience large amounts of fluctuation in their periods of demand. Additionally, infrastructure as a service can also be more flexible and agile in terms of your IT infrastructure, and the resources can be quickly scaled up or scaled down based on your user demand. Another advantage of infrastructure as a service is that it allows businesses and organizations to avoid those large upfront capital expenditures, called CapEx, as well as the ongoing expenses associated with maintaining and upgrading those physical servers. Instead, an organization can simply pay for the resources they need to use when they need to use it, and this makes it much more financially predictable, and it shifts it from a capital expenditure over to an operational expenditure, which makes it easier to manage on a year-to-year budgeting cycle. Infrastructure as a service also allows businesses to quickly add or remove resources as they need to based on changing needs. This makes it really easy to scale up your infrastructure during periods of high demand and then minimize your infrastructure during periods of low consumer demand. Again, this is especially helpful if you're running something like an e-commerce store that gets really busy during the holidays, but then the rest of the year, you're kind of slow. And so in these cases, you can have a lot of servers operating and running for you during November and December when you're doing the bulk of your sales, and then use minimal servers or resources when it comes to the rest of the year. Now, there are some drawbacks to using infrastructure as a service that you need to be aware of. One of the biggest concerns here is going to be security, because the organization is going to be responsible for securing their own data and applications within the virtualized environment when you're using an infrastructure as a service model. This is different than when you're using a software as a service model, where the provider is going to be responsible for the infrastructure and the software and all of your data. Instead, though, when you're using infrastructure as a service, the provider is only going to give you the underlying hardware, and you're responsible for all the software being installed on that infrastructure, as well as all the data you're placing into that infrastructure too. Additionally, there's many limitations on the level of customization that you can achieve when you're using these virtualized resources. And the reason for this is that these virtualized servers and resources are typically going to be pre-configured, and they're not fully tailored to your specific needs as an organization, but instead they're general purpose computing that can be used by any organization. Another drawback is that an organization is going to be responsible for maintaining and patching their own software within their virtualized environment. So, if you're running Windows Server 2019 on a virtualized instance, you're responsible for all those software patches to the Windows operating system, not your cloud service provider. This can become an additional burden on your IT staff and can take away from other important tasks that they may need to focus on, so this is something you should be aware of. Another potential drawback of infrastructure as a service is that it becomes really difficult to predict your costs. While organizations can pay for resources on this pay-as-you-go basis, they may not be aware of all the costs associated with using a particular piece of infrastructure as a service. For example, the organization may need to pay for additional services such as load balancing or data backup or log storage or things like that, and that all adds up to the overall cost of using infrastructure as a service, Whereas when you're using software as a service, you pay a single monthly fee for access to everything included in that software application, as well as the underlying infrastructure and software that's being used to host that application. Now, cloud service providers like Amazon Web Services, known as AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud's platform, known as GCP, all offer a wide variety of services that we would consider to be infrastructure as a service. First, we have Amazon Web Services, known as AWS, and AWS offers a variety of infrastructure as a service services, such as EC2, which is Elastic Cloud Compute, which is going to allow you to rent virtual machines on which you can run your own applications and services. They also have things like S3, which is a simple storage service that's offered by AWS to provide users with scalable object storage. Additionally, AWS also offers two other types of storage, known as EBS, or Elastic Block Storage, and EFS, or the Elastic File System, and both of these are used to store data as well, but in different formats. So if you're storing as an object, a block, or a file, there's 3 different infrastructures or services that you could use for those purposes. The second cloud service provider we're going to discuss is Microsoft Azure. Now, Azure offers similar infrastructure as a service type offerings, including virtual machines, known as VMs, which allow you to create and manage virtual machines on which to run your own applications and services. Azure also offers what's known as blob storage for their object storage, disk storage for block storage, and even the Azure Kubernetes Service, or AKS, which allows users to deploy and manage containerized applications much like Docker does in the traditional IT world. Third, we have the Google Cloud Platform known as GCP. Now, Google Cloud Platform also offers infrastructure as a service, including things like Compute Engine, which allows you to create and manage virtual machines on which to run your own applications and services. GCP also offers cloud storage, which provides you with scalable object storage. GCP also has persistent disk, which is used for block storage, or file store, which is used for file storage. So remember, when it comes to infrastructure as a service, this is a cloud computing service model that provides organizations with virtualized computing resources such as servers, storage, networking, virtual machines, object storage, block storage, and file storage. These services can all be used to host and run applications and services, store and process large amounts of data, and even deploy and manage containerized applications depending on the IaaS that you're using. The flexibility and scalability of these services make them really attractive for businesses of all sizes, including startups, small business, medium-sized businesses, and even large enterprise businesses across different sectors and industries. Overall, infrastructure as a service can be useful for organizations who are looking to save costs and easily scale their infrastructure, but it also requires a certain level of technical expertise and carries some security and customization risks to your organization. Additionally, organizations need to be aware of the potential costs associated with using infrastructure as a service in order to ensure they're making a completely informed decision. Despite these drawbacks, infrastructure as a service continues to be a very popular choice among many businesses of all different sizes because it provides a flexible and agile IT infrastructure while also reducing your overall costs.